Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, I'm going to go ahead and explain you about CSS pseudo selectors. I think we touched a little bit on pseudo selectors in the basics course as well, but let's just go ahead and formally look at that because this is an important thing, right? And it is like one of the most used parts as well of CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and create a very simple page here, sort of like about me, and I'm not going to make use of any selectors right here because pseudo selectors will cover that, right? So I'm going to give it a paragraph. My name is bold Mehul Mohan, and I am the founder of Codedam, right? So this is a simple paragraph. Then I could probably go ahead and create a sort of, I don't know, let's say another paragraph right here, which contains my favorite FOURITE languages, and then I can create a UL, right, which consists of some LIs, HTML, CSS. Then I could also have JavaScript here. Then I could also have React, maybe like Node.js, something like this. So you get the idea. So this is like a simple page for us. Now what I want to do is I want to add certain effects to this page, right? So if let's say I'm hovering over this, I want things to happen, and that is absolutely possible with CSS using something known as pseudo selectors. Now pseudo selector means that particular element would not really exist on the page, but either the state or with some user action or something happened which put that element into that particular state, right? Now let me just start with a very simple one which you will be able to like visually see, and that is the hover selector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Li and I'm going to say, hey, all of you have color background black, right, and color white. Simple enough. However, what I want to say that whenever I hover over these Li, I'm going to say Li hover, right? So what I did is I wrote the name of the selector, and then I wrote, colon. This colon right here is important, and then the name of the pseudo selector. In this case, it's Li hover, and I'm going to say, hey, once that happens, I'm going to have a color of green and background of red, right? So now if I go ahead and hover over this, you could see pretty much that we turn it into green and the bullet disappears because it matches the background color. So that's why it happens. And the background turns red for the Li, right? So you can see that we have sort of added a little interactivity without using JavaScript at all. So that is why you can do a lot of stuff with CSS. If you introduce animations and stuff, that becomes even more interesting. But this is like one pseudo selector, which is you can say sort of a state based or user action based selector. The user did something which enabled that, right? Then you have selectors for let's see if I can have a input field right here, input type text, right? And now what I'm going to do is something interesting. I'm going to have a, let's say, div id banner I am visible, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead right here and write input type text, or just input because we have a single field. And I'm going to say whenever I focus on this input, again, see that this is a pseudo selector because it is state dependent. Whenever I focus on this input field, what I want to have is that I want this banner to be visible. Now this is a sort of advanced use case. Hang up with me here. What's going to happen is how I select the sibling, right? Because in this case, this banner is actually the sibling of this input field. And the way to select sibling, if you did not know it, is using the plus symbol. So, hash banner, right? So, for example, if you have to select every Li inside a UL, you're going to do UL Li. This means that the immediate child of UL, that is every Li. So it will match a hierarchy, which is something like UL and then Li. but it will not match a hierarchy, which is like UL and then div and then li, right? So this is like one way of selecting immediate children. Using plus is another way of selecting a sibling, right? So anyway, once we do this, you're gonna see that I am just gonna give this a display block, right? And why I'm gonna do that? Because on the banner, I'm gonna give it a display none. So what this means is you can see that there is no I am visible on the screen at the moment. And if I click on this, you can see I am visible appears, right? So if I click out, it goes away. If I click in, it appears. Why? Why does this work? Is because by default banner is display none. And the moment I select this input focus event is activated, and it sees that, hey, whenever I have this inputs focus pseudo selector, which is currently, present on the DOM, if you can just think about it in pseudo terms, that input focus element is now present on the DOM, and the banner in front of it should be displayed. And if I click out, input focus pseudo element is now not present, and the banner, is sort of not there. So there's that. So it is again sort of like, you can think of it's a user-based, action-based pseudo selector, and yeah, there's that. That's like one use case as well. If you want to have a little bit of interactivity with the visibility of the elements, you can go ahead and do that. However, another, which is like the most interesting use case of pseudo selector according to me, is the nth child, right? And the nth child basically allows you to select elements which are not having any, they could have technically a sort of a selector, but for example, let's say if I want to select only the third li in this ul list, how are you going to do that? Well, you can technically say, you can just go ahead. Let's say I want to go ahead and select the third li. So you can say this ul li selects every, let's just go ahead and work with this. ul li is going to select everything, and I'm going to remove this as well. So I don't want to do that. I only want to have the third, that is the JavaScript, being selected. So you can, do this just like, because, I told you how to do that, but you can see it kind of does not work because this li plus li plus li selects the last three. And the reason they select the last three, it's interesting, is because li plus li plus li means the li which is the sibling of li, which is the sibling of li, right? So this constraint is fulfilled by the third one, because this is li plus li plus li, but this is also fulfilled by the fourth one, because this is li plus li plus li, and the fifth one and the sixth one. So this did not work pretty much, and to be honest, I cannot really think of a way to make it work without any class or ID and without nth child. So I'm just going to explain nth child. So what nth child does is that if I go ahead and write nth child right here and write 1, so let's see what happens. You can see that the HTML is selected. If I go ahead and write nth child 2, you're going to see CSS is selected. If I go ahead and write nth child 3, JavaScript is selected. So I hope you get the pattern here. You can actually give it an index, and remember, this index is actually 1 based, right? Nth child 0 is nothing, right? So nothing would be selected. So you have to remember that this index is 1 based and not 0 based. So you can give nth child 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will just work just like, it will just pinpoint select that element. But things get very, very interesting with nth child. Why? Because you can sort of give it a dynamic input as well. What do I mean by that? Let me just go ahead and give it an nth child of 2n. Now this is a special, it's not like you can give anything except n. You cannot give like f or anything. It would not work. You have to use the variable name as 2n, right? Or not really 2n, just the n right here. Now what does this mean? This means that what CSS engine will do is that it will take this expression right here and it will start giving it values, right? So if I write n, what's going to happen? If I write n as 1, what's going to happen? We're going to get 2. So CSS is selected. If I give n value of 2, what's going to happen is 2 times 2, 4. So React is selected, right? So if I give 2n, It's basically equivalent of writing ul child like this and then like this, right? And it is technically equivalent to, this as well, but you cannot really see it because there is no sixth element on the page. However, if there were, let's say, another Node.js, then we'll see the sixth element highlighted as well. But this approach right here will fail with the eighth one. However, if you just write 2n, it's just gonna work fine, right? So it's just gonna work like this. So 2, 4, 6, 8, all the odd, not really odd, even in this case, will be having background black and color white. This is also interesting because you can play a little math here as well. You can also subtract. So you can see that earlier we had all the odds. Now we have all the evens. I spoke like in the reverse. Earlier we had all the evens. Now we have all the odds. So you can see it starts with HTML JavaScript node. And you can also add to this stuff, right? So if you have done a little bit of, algebra, you know that this looks like sort of expression for all the, odd natural numbers, right? So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. That is why if you were expecting that HTML would not be highlighted, you were wrong, right? Because this starts filling up with 0, right? So if you have a 2n minus 1 expression, it will start n by putting it 0, right? So if you put n as 0, you're going to get -1, which does not make sense. So it's just going to skip that. If you put n as 1, it's going to be 1. That is why HTML is there. If you put n as 2, it's going to be 2 times 2, 4, minus 1, 3. That's why JavaScript is there, and so on. But with 2n plus 1, you already have, if you put 0, you have 1, right? However, if you do a 2n plus 3, you're going to see that HTML is not covered now. Why? Because this is technically 2n plus 1 plus 2, right? And you might see that this is not like how calc, it's not as flexible as calc. So you can have only 2 expressions at the given time. So you have to stick with 2n plus 3. But what's happening here is that if you put 0 in this n, it actually has to start from 3, right? That is why it starts from 1, 2, 3. So this is like super cool and super important thing as well when you're working with CSS. If you want to target elements based on randomness, a little bit of randomness, or maybe like a pattern, if you want to have I don't know, a different effect on odd and even elements, if you want to have a different effect on every third element, this is also possible. So there's that's how you do this using nth child, right? So with nth child, there is actually a little bit of convenience, and that is like a lot of times people use nth child for targeting first element or maybe like last element as well. So how do you target like the last element? So it's not really a sort of a way to target last element with nth child as far as I can remember. But what you can do is you can use some more pseudo selectors. The next one is going to be last child. So last child, just like the name says, it's going to target the last child of that particular selector which you are targeting. This means, now remember, this does not mean that it will only target one single thing. It means that ul li matches all these li's, and the last li in this one is this. However, if I sort of like duplicate this list, it will still target that thing. It will still target the other list. So it targets this one and it targets this one as well, right? It's not like a single selector based. It's just that in that particular selector itself, ul and li, it has so many options. And out of all these options, it's just going to target the last one. And obviously, if there's just a single option, it's just going to target that one. On a similar basis, you also have first child, right? So you have, the same behavior, and we already covered nth child. So there are a bunch of more CSS selectors. I'm not going to get into depth of every single one of them, because if you need them, you can sort of like use them, because if you have, like, for example, we can also discuss real quick with the input selectors a little bit, right? So we have an input field right here, and following the same sort of strategy for input, what we can say is that let's say if input is I don't know, enabled, let's see, and then if I have a banner in front of it, I just want to display none, right? So you can see right now the input is enabled. That is why the banner is not display. Let's assume that there was a button here which disables the input field. That is, you cannot really enter anything else. So if I add a disabled attribute to sort of mimic that behavior, you can see now that because the input is disabled, now I am able to see the banner. If I remove this, I will not be able to see I am visible. So again, this is also a sort of a pseudo selector. Now there exist a lot of pseudo selectors, you know, checked, disabled, blank pseudo selector is also there, which we can probably show in a much better way. But blank would not work right now because it's a in work progress thing, so it will land later on in the specification. If you're watching this video, try out blank and see if it works. If it works, then you're from, you know, a distant future. But yeah, it does not work at the moment with browser, but it is definitely under the spec. So yeah, there are other selectors as well. You're free to take a look at all of them if you want, but that's pretty much what you would need in a nutshell when you're starting off. So that is all for this video, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.